My wife doesn't love me. She has a well-known ex-boyfriend who remains her unforgettable first love. On our 7th wedding anniversary, she lay in the arms of this unforgettable ex-boyfriend, smiling sweetly. She doesn't know I'm sick and dying. She says her ex-boyfriend saved her when she was being followed. But only I know it was actually me who saved her. She trampled my dignity underfoot. Yet after my death, my wife, who always treated me with cold indifference, went mad. Honey, come home early after work today. It's our wedding anniversary. Let's celebrate properly. I rubbed the anniversary gift I'd chosen for my wife weeks earlier. It was a necklace she once said she really liked. Just looking at it, I could imagine how happy she'd be when she saw it. Lu Shi and I have been married for 7 years. Back then, Lu Shi was the goddess worshipped by many boys in our class, while I was just another face among the crowd quietly admiring her. 2 years after our marriage, we welcomed a lovely daughter. Working late, not coming back to. Her tone remained as cold as ever. At some point, she started refusing to come home under the guise of overtime work. Every time I asked, it was always, overtime, busy. Now, I've grown accustomed to it. 7 years. It's not really a big deal, right? For dinner, I held our daughter while eating at the dining table. Dad, where's Mom? Mom isn't coming back again. Yu hasn't seen Mom for so long. Yu misses Mom. Looking at my daughter's expression, my heart ached a little. I reached out to wipe the rice grains from the corner of her mouth. Mom will come back tomorrow. Yu, be good and wait for Mom to come back, okay? After Yu fell asleep that night, I hesitated for a long time, but still gave my wife a call. It's Fish who misses her. The phone rang on, second by second, until it automatically disconnected. Perhaps due to some premonition, I found myself unusually sleepless. Just past midnight, a notification buzzed through my phone. Reading that message struck me like a thunderbolt. There was my wife, nestled in another man's arms with a blissful expression on her face. The man, I recognized him. My throat began to spasm, and I dashed to the bathroom, vomiting mouthfuls of bright red blood. Lu Shi, do you know that I'm going to die? At this moment, messages on my phone kept popping up one after another. I had a great time on your 7th anniversary, and she did too. How about you? Her taste keeps getting better. I had a wonderful night. Your wife is so happy in my bed. Are you just not up to it? I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, staring coldly at the messages he sent. It was Bai Xingran, Lu Shi's first love. Bai Xingran was the notorious playboy from the neighboring finance department. His pursuit of Lu Shi had been grand and ostentatious, with his confession day attracting the entire school's way gone. For some unknown reason, Bai Xingran was sent abroad by his family before graduation. Then Lu Shi approached me, asking if I wanted to marry her. We attended the same high school. I'd liked her since then, so of course I jumped at the chance. As I was lost in thought, Bai Xingran's call came through. I masochistically pressed answer. Baby, who feels better? My wife's voice on the other end sounded sickeningly sweet in a way I'd never heard before. Of course you do, baby. You have no idea how disgusted I feel facing Chung Yuan. If you hadn't suddenly gone abroad back then, how could I have married someone like this? I feel utterly disgusted every time I share a bed with him. The moans in my ear grew increasingly loud. I shut my eyes tightly. Do I really disgust you that much? I thought 7 years would have left at least some trace of me in your heart. I don't know how I made it through this night. I shifted my feet, which had gone numb from standing. Lu Shi, you've really outdone yourself. We once had a time of great happiness, back when we'd just gotten married. We celebrated every anniversary, prepared gifts for each other, and created surprises. Whenever she nestled softly in my arms, I felt like I owned the whole world. She would also fret so much when I was sick that she couldn't eat, taking care of me through the nights. Even with hands covered in burns and blisters, she'd stubbornly insist, "This wasn't from cooking for you. It was an accident." I gently stroked her hair and said, "You've worked hard. I love you. But now, I don't know where things went wrong. She doesn't love me anymore." Leaving the hospital, I recalled what the doctor had just told me. The illness progressed too rapidly. By the time it was discovered, it was already too late to control. I only have 3 months left to live. I stuffed the test results into my bag without a second thought. Check the time. It's time to pick up Yu. Dad, will Mom come home today? Holding my daughter's hand with one hand and opening the door with the other, I don't know. Mom's been very busy lately. As soon as the door opened, my daughter bounced inside. Mom. Lu Shi had returned. I stood at the doorway looking at her. Time seemed to have left no traces on her face. She stood before me, as if the high school version of her had reappeared. I knew, no matter how far she went, I could never resent her. Take Yu to my mom's house tomorrow. Pack your things, da. Okay, da. After speaking, Lu Shi took Yu back to their room. I stood in the living room watching the retreating figures of mother and daughter. I won't get divorced. I only have a few months left to live, at least in Yu's memories. She'll remember having a father who loved her deeply. I entered the room and saw Lu Shi packing. Pressed my lips together. Where are you going with the packing? She seemed startled by me, frowning. Why did you come in without making a sound? She frowned at me. The company is busy. I plan to stay near the office these days. You take good care of Yu at home. Hearing this, I silently clenched my fists and stared fixedly at her. Is the company really that busy? What else? Where do you think I'm going? I had an impulse. What if I told her I'm about to die? Would she stay with me in my final days? Would she regret having been so cold to me before? I'm dying, Lu Shi. As if I'd said something ridiculous, she paused her packing. She looked at me impatiently, then go die? Why tell me? Facing her disgusted expression, I forced a bitter smile. Why did you choose to marry me back then? I'm begging you. Stay home with me. At least until I die. As these words left my mouth, I felt like I'd thrown my self-respect underfoot and stomped on it viciously. But I had no choice. I love her. I've loved Lu Shi for so many years. She seemed about to say something when her phone suddenly rang. She shot me a nervous glance before exiting the room with her phone. Humph. Cheng Yuan, you're truly worthless. Pathetic, even. She still left. Standing by the balcony, I watched Lu Shi get into a car that came to pick her up. I could no longer suppress the blood clogging my throat. Violent coughs racked my body, one after another. My phone buzzed with new messages. Cheng Yuan, you must come to the class reunion in a few days. Yeah, you've skipped several years. No absences allowed this time. It was our university class group chat. So rare to gather after all these years post-graduation. Okay, I'll be there. I've resigned from my company job. I want to spend my final days with my daughter. I want her to know her father loves her desperately. On the day of the class reunion, I dropped Yu off at her grandpa's house. Lu Shi's parents had retired, and they adored Yu. I took out my suit from the wardrobe and stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing the person reflected in it. I had grown increasingly gaunt, the flesh on my cheeks nearly hollowed out. My entire face was pale as a corpse. Before even entering, I could already hear the lively chatter inside. Despite the years apart, no one seemed distant. Hey, Cheng Yuan. Cheng Yuan's here. The moment I walked in, the room erupted with excitement. I walked over and sat on the sofa, immediately surrounded by eager questions. Cheng Yuan, you rascal. Back at graduation, who didn't envy you? You were the guy who married Lu Shi. Yeah, I saw on your moments. You two even have a daughter now? Total life winner. USA? ID it. Back then, who didn't whisper a few words behind your back? You lucky bastard, marrying our goddess. That's not quite right. If you had Cheng Yuan's face, the goddess would marry you too. Everyone crowded around me, chattering all at once. Why did you come alone? Where's your wife? My smile stiffened, and I lowered my head slightly. She's busy, couldn't make it. Working overtime at the company. Truthfully, I'd messaged her on WeChat asking if she wanted to come together. After a long time, Lu Shi finally replied. Busy, not coming. Everyone started sharing stories about how capitalism had taught them lessons after graduation. They talked about their future plans, what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go. My heart was a mix of emotions as I raised my glass and took a sip. Cheng Yuan, what are you planning to do next? With a wife and kid, you must be grinding hard, right? What was I planning to do? Just as I opened my mouth to respond, the private room door swung open. Everyone fell silent upon seeing the newcomer, looking at me, then at the newcomer. Yo, sorry I'm late. Let me apologize to everyone. I'll cover tonight's bill. It was Bai Xingran, with Lu Shi standing beside him. Lu Shi's presence felt like a resounding slap, striking hard across my face. Not only had she come, but she stood next to another man. My throat began to itch. I hastily pulled the handkerchief from my pocket and broke into a coughing fit. The group exchanged uneasy glances, no one daring to speak. I was exhausted. What's wrong, everyone? How could a class reunion happen without me? Aren't we all classmates? I stood up and stared at Bai Xingran. Cheng Yuan, thanks for taking care of my wife and child. Must have been tough for you, duh. What child? Yu. Yu is my daughter. Did you really think she was yours? My pillar of strength crumbled in that moment. Clenching down hard on the inner fury, I looked at Lu Shi. Yu isn't my daughter? Her eyes began to dart evasively. Xingran came back once, during your birthday, when you were working overtime. Gritting my teeth, I swung my fist and charged at Bai Xingran. The power unleashed by extreme rage is terrifying. I struck Bai Xingran with savage force, blow after blow, until we soon grappled with each other. The onlookers rushed to pull us apart. I broke free from the crowd and walked toward Lu Shi step by step. Raised my hand. She thought I was going to hit her. Instinctively flinched. Looking at her, my strength suddenly drained away. Lu Shi, let's get divorced. I remember that day when I worked overtime on my birthday. Lu Shi unprecedentedly came to pick me up at the company building. I never expected her to come to the company for me. That day, I was happy like a fool. Never imagined this was actually compensation, Bo. RN of her guilty conscience. Now, I'll let you go, and you let me go too. Let's just say the girl I liked since high school is dead. The classmates nearby were whispering among themselves. What's going on? Why is Lu Shi with Bai Xingran? Didn't Bai Xingran go abroad? Cheng Yuan just said Lu Shi was working overtime, and the next second she shows up with Bai Xingran. TSK, TSK, TSK. Cheng Yuan got cuckolded. Holy shit, who would have guessed? Lu Shi's ruthless. Not only cuckolded Cheng Yuan, but also made him raise the child. Cheng Yuan's life is truly tragic. Lu Shi's face showed a hint of bewilderment. If it were before, I would have wiped her tears away. But now, it only fills me with utter disgust. The person I loved for so many years stabbed me viciously when I was down. Lu Shi, what exactly do you want from me? I closed my eyes briefly, looking at her with disappointment. Lu Shi, you don't love me. Yu isn't my child either. After 7 years, I have nothing. Let's end things here. I walked to the entrance of the hotel, looking up at the sunlight overhead. It was a bit blinding. I moved forward step by step. Then suddenly, everything went dark before my eyes, and I collapsed. When I woke again, I was lying on a hospital bed. Medical instruments beeped rhythmically beside me. The doctor looked at me and sighed. Your condition shouldn't have progressed this rapidly. Your emotional fluctuations are too intense. The spread of your illness is accelerating. I smiled indifferently. Can I just not treat it? I want to go home. It's incurable anyway. You have 1 month left. I fell silent for a moment. A whole month? That's still quite long. I thought I might die tomorrow or the day after. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned home. I was already extremely weak. Just these few steps were enough to drain most of my strength. I opened the door to my home and sat down on the sofa. This sofa, it was a small home we could only afford after 3 years of marriage. At that time, Yu was already 1 year old, and we spent every day at the new house monitoring the renovation progress. Back then, no matter how hard or exhausting it got, it all seemed sweet. Every renovation detail in the house was supervised in shifts by me and my wife. The room design took us a full month to finalize. Every piece of furniture was chosen after we made countless trips to furniture stores, personally tested and selected. When we officially moved into the new home, I stood holding Yu in one arm and embracing my wife with the other. Looking at our home, we smiled happily, filled with unparalleled contentment. We finally have our own home. Back then, we were still so happy. I slumped weakly against the sofa backrest, my arm draped over my eyes. A man does not shed tears easily, but I couldn't hold back a Nymore. Why? Like a wandering corpse, I arrived at our university. Surrounding students looked at me strangely, quietly keeping their distance. Understandable, my current appearance doesn't look normal at all. I wandered from classroom to classroom, as if traces of us lingered everywhere. Here was the field where we had our military training. Back then, Lu Shi was physically frail, and I would always rush to the campus store during breaks to buy her a cold bottled water, stealthily placing it near her water cup. This was where I teamed up with Lu Shi for our first debate competition. That night, she was radiantly captivating, confident, and assertive. She outright rendered the opposing team speechless. Here by the river, I saw Lu Shi and Bai Xingran walking hand in hand along the riverbank. My entire body turned icy cold in an instant, blood rushing to the top of my head. What do they take me for? Lu Shi smiled so happily at Bai Xingran. In the 7 years of our marriage, she had never once smiled at me as joyfully as this. I charged forward and landed a punch on Bai Xingran's face. What the hell are you doing? The sudden turn of events left them stunned. Bai Xingran picked himself up off the ground. I muttered a curse under my breath. Blinded by rage, I swung my clenched fist to strike again. Suddenly, Lu Shi stepped in front of Bai Xingran. She shielded him tightly. Cheng Yuan, haven't you done enough? Looking at Lu Shi shielding Bai Xingran, I stood frozen. Haven't I done enough? How absurd. My wife was shielding another man with her own body, asking me if I've gone too far. As if I were the intrusive third party here. Bai Xingran stood behind Lu Shi, looking at me with a challenging expression, mouthing the words, pathetic coward. Lu Shi turned to examine the wound on Bai Xingran's face and said to me, how dare you hit him? I stared at Lu Shi with extreme fury. Why shouldn't I hit him? My wife shields another man right in front of me, and I'm not allowed to strike him? Lu Shi stood firm. Aren't we getting divorced? I have nothing to do with you anymore. What rotten luck. Even hiding this far away, I still run into you. I stood rooted to the spot, watching their two retreating figures. Lu Shi, do you really hate me that much? I placed the divorce agreement on the table and left quietly. I no longer have family. My parents died in a car accident on the day I received my college admission letter. Later, I married Lu Shi, and we had Yu. I thought heaven had smiled upon me again, only to realize it was all a joke. I've lived like a joke. I slowly walked downstairs, and Bai Xingran was waiting there for me. I glanced at him, but had no intention of engaging. Cheng Yuan, I hope you'll divorce Xiaoxi as soon as possible. Yu is my daughter. Tell me we're a family. What's an outsider like you doing here? I love Lu Shi, and Lu Shi loves me. You're just a backup she settled for. Did you think Lu Shi didn't know about your feelings for her? She knows it perfectly well. I stopped and looked at him. His expression mocked me for not only wearing the green hat, but also raising another man's daughter for years. I should have finished you off back then. How does it feel raising another man's child? Spineless coward. I couldn't hold back anymore, violently grabbing Bai Xingran's collar. Say that again, you bastard. He sneered at me mockingly and shoved me hard onto the ground. I'm too weak. Even a child could easily push me over now. He kicked me forcefully, one blow after another. Hurry up and die. You good for nothing. My hands grabbed his leg, and I bit down hard. His hand struck down violently, and I soon lost consciousness. I was shaken awake by a violent jolt. Cheng Yuan. Lao Si, wake up. I opened my eyes and recognized the person in front of me. Lao Wu, you're here. Cheng Yuan. How did you end up like this? His tears fell drop by drop onto my face. I chuckled softly. Old Fifth, it's raining. Lying immobilized on the bed, Old Fifth sat beside me sighing heavily. No, I have to go find her. They're just too damn bullying. I grabbed his hand. Forget it. Besides, I'm about to die anyway. Old Fifth turned his back, blew his nose fiercely, then wiped his tears with his hand. You, how could you end up like this? A perfectly fine person. How come you're dying? What will I do if you die? Who else will listen to me brag besides you? It's okay. In the future, when you want to spout bullshit, just come to my grave and spout it. You can ramble as long as you want. Fifth brother could no longer hold back. A grown man buried his head by my bedside and started crying. How could they treat a perfectly good person like you this way? When we graduated, you were still that handsome guy who got asked for WeChat on the streets. Now, just a skeleton remains. Tell me, if I hadn't come to find you, what would you have done? Listening to Lao Wu's choked complaints, I weakly smiled. I knew you'd come. Cheng Yuan, you always know how to handle me. My body was growing weaker by the day, lying in bed all the time. When I finally managed to open my eyes, my phone started ringing incessantly. Lao Wu picked up the phone and glanced at it, his face twisting with disgust. It's Lu Shi. I remained silent for a moment. Answer it. Where are you? Let's meet. Lu Shi's voice rang in my ear. I stayed silent for a while. There's nothing left for us to talk about now. Say what you need to say. Cheng Yuan. She paused. You will come. Cheng Yuan. You see, she clearly doesn't like me, yet she understands me so well. Even now, I still can't refuse her. Lu. She and I sat facing each other in the cafe we used to frequent. After pondering in my heart for a long time, I finally asked, why did you choose to marry me back then? She fell silent for a moment, as if pondering how to begin. I know you like me. I've known for a long time, since high school. When I first started college, I was stalked once. Bai Xingran saved me that time. I fell in love with him just like you fell in love with me back then. Didn't you start liking me in the first place because I saved you? I could no longer hear what she said afterward. I asked with disbelief, you re-saying it was Bai Xingran who saved you? She nodded. My heart was filled with a sense of absurdity, as if life had played a colossal joke on me. Was it Bai Xingran who saved you? When did Bai Xingran ever save you? Wasn't it me who saved you? Bai Xingran saved you? He dares to claim that. I steadied myself and asked, trying hard to remain calm. When? It was a few months into freshman year. That day I returned late from my part-time job and unexpectedly encountered a stalker. When I woke up in the hospital, Bai Xingran was by my side. To me, what you did matters more than what you said. I knew. It was me who saved her. I'd always known about her part-time job. The place where Lu Shi worked part-time was some distance from campus. After learning this, I secretly followed behind her every night, quietly escorting her back to school. When I discovered someone following Lu Shi, that scar on my body came from that very night. After the man ran away, I collapsed unconscious on the ground. At that time, Bai Xingran's pursuit of Lu Shi was known to everyone. Yet it was shortly after this incident that they suddenly became a couple. I always thought Lu Shi chose Bai Xingran because she liked him. Never imagined. If Bai Xingran hadn't impersonated me back then, if I had insisted on walking to her side that day, would our ending have been different? Would I have had a wife who truly loved me? Could we have grown old together in mutual affection? Bai Xingran, you've ruined my entire life. Bitterness gradually welled up in my heart. I chose not to tell Lu Shi. This was my revenge against her. I can't wait to see how devastated Lu Shi will be when she discovers the truth. The savior you've been longing for, the savior you abandoned your family and children to follow, is actually the one who ruined your life. I will make you live in regret for the rest of your life. So what? What do you want from me? Lu Shi paused, then took out the divorce agreement from her bag. I've signed this. Also, I'm planning to marry Bai Xingran. My throat started itching again. How impressive. Oh, that was quick. Getting married right after the divorce? Then why did you marry me in the first place? Was playing with me that fun? She's taking advantage of the fact that I like her. You were just a backup option. If Xingran hadn't been sent abroad back then, I probably wouldn't have glanced at you. Every moment with you felt like pure torment. The wife who slept beside me for years finds me disgusting, and being with me was pure torment. How could she utter such icy words? I don't want to hear anymore. The more I listen, the more I feel like a joke. How absurd. The plot of mistaking someone's identity has happened to me. I've lived like a fucking joke. I'm disgusting? Ha 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 ha, fine. I'm disgusting. Then you've really suffered these years, sticking with me through such hardship. I had always thought I finally had my own family, a harbor of my own. Bought a car, bought a house, had a beautiful wife and an adorable, well-behaved daughter. Until I was dragged from heaven to hell in a single night. She told me everything was fake, that I was actually nothing. Lu Shi, you'd better never know the truth. Better hope Bai Xingran can lie to you for a lifetime. Lu Shi looked at me with disgust. Take a look at yourself now. What's there to like? With that haggard, lifeless look on your face, and now you've even lost your job. Don't you think your life is a complete failure? I touched my face. It truly looked haggard. I don't have many days left. I'm about to die. Lu Shi stood up, picked up her bag. Let's end things here. Moreover, you mustn't show your face around you anymore. She pushed open the door and got into a car. I watched her figure gradually fade into the distance and could no longer hold back the blood in my throat. The vomited blood trickled down from my chin onto my clothes. I sat there motionless like a fool. A wave of dizziness and vertigo struck. I collapsed weakly in the cafe. Screams erupted from people around me. I felt somewhat apologetic. Sorry for startling you all. The cafe staff called 120 for me, and I was rushed to the hospital. The familiar medical instruments were attached to my body again. Accompanied by the beeping of medical equipment, I slowly opened my eyes. Lao Wu was resting with his head on my bedside, exhausted from days of constant care. I never imagined that at the end of my life, it would be Lao Wu staying by my side. All because I'd shared a few meals with him when he couldn't afford food. Back then, I pretended to have ordered extra portions I couldn't finish. When I placed the food before Lao Wu, who was eating steamed buns with pickles, tears welled up in his eyes. While eating, she said, "In this lifetime, I only acknowledge you as my brother. No matter what happens to you, as long as you call me, I will never refuse." At the time, I smiled without saying a word and didn't take it to heart. But now, by my side, only Lao Wu remains. Lao Wu opened his eyes, saw that I was awake. He was a bit emotional. "You finally woke up. Wait here, I'll call the doctor." After the doctor completed all examinations, he silently shook his head. After calling old Fifth out, my heart already had its suspicions. My body, I know it very well. After a long while, Fifth brother finally returned. When he came back in, his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. He tucked the blanket around me. "Cheng Yuan, the doctor said you can recover. Just focus on treatment in the hospital. When you're cured, there's still a long time ahead." I steadied my breath, too weak to speak. "Fifth brother, I know I don't have many days left. I don't want to die in a hospital. Let's leave da." He froze suddenly, bent halfway as if petrified. After a long silence, his voice choked. Why does every damn thing happen to you? You re such a good person. Why won't fate leave you even a sliver of hope? What more do they want from you?" We left the hospital. I was beyond saving. Staying longer would only waste money. After returning home, I lay on Fifth brother's bed, drifting in and out of haze all day. I could feel my life force draining away bit by bit. Now I can't eat even a little bit of food. It really hurts. The pain keeps me tossing and turning every night, unable to sleep, staring awake until dawn. I smiled and said to Lao Wu, "Living is such torment. Why not let me die sooner?" Lao Wu always tears up. "Don't talk nonsense. You won't die. You'll get better. No one should endure all the suffering alone. Even in misery, there must be a limit." He even moved a small bed next to mine, sleeping beside me every night. He often jolts awake at midnight, placing his fingers under my nose to check if I'm still breathing. Occasionally, I feel guilty, a young man in his prime, stuck at home with a dying person like me. It's unfair to him. My phone rang several times with calls from Lu Shi, but I hung up every time. How absurd. Why call now? Didn't you find me disgusting? Aren't you marrying Bai Xingran? What are you pretending now? I asked Lao Wu to find me a diary. I want to leave one last thing in this world. Lu Shi somehow learned I was staying with Lao Wu. She looked at me in disbelief. "Cheng Yuan, how did you become like this?" I smiled carelessly with a hint of malice. "I told you I was dying. Didn't you tell me to die somewhere far away? Why are you looking for me now?" I stared intently at her face. "Lu Shi, would you feel even slightly sad for me? Even if just a little bit?" She shook her head. "I didn't know your illness was this serious. I thought you were lying to me." Old Wu couldn't listen anymore. Would Cheng Yuan lie to you? He'd never deceive you of all people in this world. Lu Shi fell silent upon hearing this. "I know." She pulled out a medical report from her bag, and I remembered. It was the one I casually stuffed in my bag after that hospital examination. You found this in your bag. I know an expert who's excellent at treating this condition. Would you consider trying? Old Wu looked at me with hopeful eyes. I shook my head. "No, I'm already beyond treatment. I don't need your hypocritical kindness. Just live peacefully with Bai Xingran. After all, I disgust you." Lu Shi stood before me, and I studied her carefully. It seemed she'd been living well these days. Her face stiffened. Don't be ungrateful. If it weren't for how good you've been to Yu, I wouldn't bother coming. If you die, you die. Do whatever you want. As I looked at her face, I suddenly remembered the first time I'd seen Lu Shi. Back then, she was youthful and tender, like a beam of light piercing through my bleak and monotonous high school years. I have claustrophobia. During a physical education class, my classmates accidentally locked me in the equipment room. I pounded the door with my hands, crying until my voice went hoarse. It was Lu Shi who rescued me. Only Lu, she remembered me. At that moment, I lay on the dust-covered floor, watching her panting breathlessly after running to fetch the teacher. She was so beautiful, so utterly captivating. Without her, I would have died. It's hard to describe the emotions I felt. I began to quietly pay attention to her. She was like a little sun, illuminating those around her. Beautiful, academically gifted, cheerful. Everyone adored her. I was no exception. I worked hard to get into the same university and study the same major as her. But my hidden affection shattered before it could even be spoken. She treated everyone with kindness, except me. Towards me alone, she was utterly cold. If there was no case of mistaken identity, we would have been a very happy pair of lovers. After Lu Shi left, my health began to gradually deteriorate. Fortunately, my diary also slowly began to reach its conclusion. I started falling into deep sleep from time to time, and every time I woke up, I saw Lao Wu sitting by my side. When he noticed I was awake, he would always heave a sigh of relief. Cheng Yuan, don't be like this. It scares me, duh. People always experience a moment of lucidity before death. That day, when I awoke, I felt inexplicably energetic, as if the pain that had lingered for so long had vanished. With the support of Fifth Brother, I managed to put on my clothes. Old Fifth, I want to go back to the high school and take a look. I watched the children in school uniforms on their way to school and smiled softly. It felt like I had returned to the past, to the time when I first met Lu Shi. Old Fifth, today is Lu Shi's wedding day, right? I weakly leaned against the car seat, slowly began to speak. Old 5SE said something. Right, they're getting married today. I'm actually quite petty. This diary is the last gift I'm leaving for Lu Shi. Along with the diary, what I've sent over also includes my will. I don't know how Lu Shi will react when she sees the contents inside. My eyes gradually moistened and slowly closed. The pain in my body grew heavier and heavier. I couldn't hold on anymore. I seemed to see Lu Shi, wearing her high school uniform, walking toward me with a smile on her lips. If I could start over, I never want to meet you again. My entire life flashed before my eyes. There were my long-deceased parents, Yu, my classmates, and Lu Shi. Fortunately, I wasn't alone when I died. Lao Wu stayed with me. A tear slid down the corner of my eye. Goodbye. After death, I didn't vanish immediately. I felt my body slowly lifting into the air. I watched as Lu Shi and Bai Xingran exchanged rings, and at the moment of exchanging rings, Lu Shi's heart suddenly ached violently. She clutched her chest, barely able to recover. Watched old Wu cremate me according to my Shengqian wish, scattering my ashes into the sea. There's nothing left in this world worth clinging to. I'd rather vanish without a trace. As I predicted, Lu Shi frantically searched for me after reading the diary. She called me over and over again, like a madwoman. But I'm already dead, Lu Shi. You'll never find me again. Lao Wu saw Lu Shi crouching at his doorstep when he returned from the beach. What are you still doing here? I watched Lu Shi, her eyes red, ask where is he? Lao Wu wiped his face. Cheng Yuan is dead. He's dead. He said he never wanted to see you again. If he could do it all over again, he'd never want to meet you. Are you happy now? He didn't want you here. Get lost. I watched as Lu Shi collapsed weakly against the doorframe, breaking down in heart-wrenching sobs. Cheng Yuan, I was wrong. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I beg you, come back. I was wrong. Why didn't you tell me sooner? And I treated you like that. I'm sorry, Cheng Yuan. It was me who so easily mistook someone else for you. Please, Cheng Yuan. Please come back. I'm sorry. Bai Xingran emerged from the elevator and pulled the weeping Lu Shi into his arms. Don't be like this. It's my fault. I shouldn't have lied to you. I didn't mean to impersonate him on purpose. I just loved you so much, Cici. Lu Shi suddenly slapped Bai Xingran across the face. It's all your fault. You should be the one to die, Bai Xingran. I hate you. For your sake, I treated Cheng Yuan like that. Go die? Bring Cheng Yuan back. Bai Xingran, just die. It's too late now, Lu Shi. This is my final gift to you. Are you happy now? I once pleaded so humbly for you to stay with me. But what about you? You told me to hurry up and die. Now that I'm dead, or why? Oh, you happy? Later, Lu Shi suddenly went mad. She began to lose touch with reality. Sometimes she'd wander around the house in her high school uniform, then abruptly open a door with a joyful smile. Cheng Yuan, I'm here to save you. Other times she'd pretend to relive that fateful night, trembling all over while hiding under the table, refusing to come out no matter who called. just murmuring and shouting, Cheng Yuan will come to save me. Cheng Yuan will come to save me. I won't go out. I won't go out. I looked at the deranged her. It was too late now. Lu Shi, this is my gift to you. Are you happy? Bai Xingran didn't dare to appear before Lu Shi at all. When Lu Shi saw him, she would scream madly, get out. Get out. It's all your fault. All your fault. Get out of our home. Yu would always cry upon seeing Lu Shi, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost. When she was lucid, she would hold Yu and reminisce about her father together, pointing at our wedding photos saying this is Yu's dad. When confused, she would glare venomously at Yu and tell her to get out, because she is Bai Xingran's daughter. Lu Shi's illness grew increasingly severe until she had to be sent to a psychiatric hospital. She would constantly talk to herself facing the wall, pointing at a certain spot while laughing and calling out my name. She refuses to wake up, forever trapped in the dream she's woven for herself. In that dream, there are no misunderstandings between us. We two remain in love until the very end. Looking at Lu Shi now, I suddenly feel a sense of release. Lu Shi, we're even now. Let's not meet again in the next life.